Just in case anybody wonders about my timekeeping, I believe the clock on the wall behind me is fast, and it's the clock on my smartphone that is in control of the time. Now, I've just had a small representation that we swapped the order of the next two speakers to us. So can I invite Louise from Greytown up, and Warren, are you going to join her?
I think it's just supporting.
Just supporting it, okay. So thank you very much. I'll just start by saying something I said at a couple of other times during our session today, because we keep getting rotating visitors. In the case of an emergency, we leave either through the door you came in or the door behind us. We gather around by the children's playground, and we await instructions. So Louise, welcome. Lovely to have you here. And the next 10 minutes are all yours.
Thank you. And thank you for having me here. It's good to see everyone. So today I'm speaking as chair to our community plan that's put forth for consideration. I appreciate that you all have had an opportunity to read our community plan. My focus is mainly to just point to sort of the significant factors that we're really sort of trying to push forward. We've identified 4 areas of priority. One of those areas we've been able to do some real work on, which is the emergency response. I think in that area on page 81, if we were to ask the board to look for support, we'd probably be looking for that support in how we may purchase and supply goods for flooding, as well as helping us develop our community network and our community patrol. I think the next thing that is sort of more significant to discuss is at page 84. This is under our cultural and heritage. While we appreciate that the council and the concern is how we place the rates and where they go, for Greytown, green space and our parks and our reserves are of great importance to us. They are quite significant. We have very important ones by being the first day in New Zealand. We have Arbor Day, we have our Arbor Reserve. We also have a Soldiers Memorial Park, which is a monument to soldiers that have fallen from Greytown and continues to be. So one of the things we are concerned about is the care of our park and reserves and how the money is being allotted in that care, which is one of the reasons we have looking to advocate to the council to potentially delegate the responsibility of that care to the community board, because we do feel that we are better placed to keep an eye on what's occurring and to ensure that things are going forward. For instance, we have concerns that 6 months on now, and we have a toilet that has not been fixed at Arbor Reserve. Why that's not, where's that funding and so forth. In addition to that, it's just the general care. I appreciate there's been information about looking into that, but there is still a great deal of stronger care that needs to be looked at to those grants. The other thing is green space. We're aware that the South Wairarapa District Council may be looking at ways to deal with space and green space within Greytown. We think that's important to have a consideration to what the community board knows. In particular, Greytown has the least amount of green space, so we are quite keen to maintain the space that we have and look to have the council support us in potentially acquiring additional space to allow that to meet the needs of the community in the fields, in the parks, and so forth. The next area I will speak to, which comes in under our tourism and economics, that's at page 86. Mainly what I'm sort of putting there is it's become apparent through times of COVID, times of just growing communities, that the support that we can receive through the tourism coming in, as difficult as we find that, it's important. And we are trying to build within Greytown events. We have strong events that we have now, but we're also looking to build more events and more attention to that, because in a way, as you bring people in, you bring the money into the areas, and it's not just the restaurants or the accommodation that benefit, or just necessarily even the retail shops, because we have to remember it's individuals within the town that have those jobs It also benefits our local farmers, the orchards, all those different areas actually still have a touch into that. So looking for support and growing the events area, and that may require sometimes support from the council, looking at what areas they would support. I know some of our events are quite expensive and they could use assistance. The final one is community, which is probably the most important. I've just come from continually trying to work on the community. I think the biggest thing that the Greytown Community Board learned through our consultation for the community plan was the message not to forget the whole community and to remember that not everyone, while Greytown may have the highest rates because it has the highest property prices, it doesn't necessarily mean every individual within there is owning that property or is in that same position. We do have an older population there that can't be forgotten. And when I also look at handicap or disabled disability parking, we have to remember when we say things like disability, we're not necessarily referring to age. One of the things that's quite key to us is not forgetting those though. It is concerned that we have very limited housing for pensioners. I appreciate that that's something that the council feels that it hasn't been able to look at, but there still, as I understand, is consideration of development of that land in West Street, which has been pensioner. And if there is going to be development there, then I do think continuing that path down the pensioner should be, because that's the intention. The board is itself going to take steps and we'll be looking for support for that. I think the other thing though is that disability parking is not existent on any street in Greytown. And that is concerning. There are disability parking locations within Fresh Choice, but that is technically a private parking lot for that business. In South Wairarapa, Working Men's Club has it, but I do not believe, and I'm looking at that today and trying to look at that more, that there's any disability parking in the parking lot which the council has access to, and that's important. There is disability parking attached to the town hall, but that's it really. That is actually, you could say, public availability for. The other disability parking I know is in the parking lot where the hub is, but I have a feeling that that parking lot, because of reserved parking spots in there, is private. So whilst we are talking to Waka Kotahi and those plans, disability parking along Main Street, I think is crucial. I think it's crucial for visitors and I think it's crucial for the town members. And if we can't achieve that, then disability parking at the intersections of those main streets within the historic area, which would be Curtis PT, McMaster Street, those areas that allow individuals to be able to utilize the important part of the town. We can't forget that. So that is something that's quite strong. We also have linking with Martinborough food banks. I know Martinborough Food Bank is possibly coming to the council for consideration, and I would support any submissions they make for funding because they have joined and allowed Greytown to join them. And we now have 10 or 11 families utilizing them, and that's likely to grow as we go forward. So we are supporting any movement that Martinborough Food Bank does. The other thing that we're also wanting to do, and we would look for assistance in, is we do believe that there's some land that belongs to the council that isn't being utilized and may not be utilized in the ways wanted. And we'd like to look at them for community gardens. In particular, there's the land that backs onto what's known as the Arbor Reserve next to the railway. We've also been looking at the land, if it's not going to be developed for pensioner housing at West Park for community gardens. And obviously assistance and funding with that is quite important. I think those are ways that we can help the community and all of the community. So we are looking for support and consideration of that. And I think also there is a building that is being considered right now for being returned to retail. We put in our submissions for it to be a Greytown library, but I think what we're essentially saying is it is a historic building, and how that could be benefited by the community should be taken into consideration before a contract is entered into for just another retail outlet. whether it could be utilized again as the Greytown Library, which is a suggestion, and therefore allowing the town hall to not have those restrictions that it does by having the library there for the quiet times is important, and that our town hall could then maybe be utilized more for activities and events and centers that again would draw, as we say, to the community and bring resources to the community. So Greytown's proud of its buildings. Greytown's proud of the fact that it is the most Victorian original buildings there, and we want to know and have a say in how those buildings continue to be used and maintained. So that I would say is something else. And I think that would be my submissions.
Okay, thank you very much, Louise. Now we've got a couple of minutes. Does any, yes, Councillor Plymouth.
Yeah, hi Louise, thanks for that. I just want to talk tourism and economic opportunities. Has Adam had a chance to present that Main Street vision?
We've seen that, yeah. And that's one of the reasons it's in our plan, is to also identify that.
Is the community board generally supportive of that vision? Because there's some early wins that could be done on that space, you know, as you and I have talked about. But
You'll see in the community plan that we've actually endorsed that Main Street. It is under that tourism. So we have actually an endorsement of the style guide of the Greytown Heritage Trust, and also any maintainment of the Main Street, and a request to actually not have fast food stores to go in there. And that's all sort of part of that vision. As far as some of that stuff going forward, yes, I've actually had discussions with Adam Blackwell and another team who are working towards that, and or as far as like community cleanup, and those are all sort of things, the painting and those things, those are exactly things that we are looking to be more involved in support of that. And essentially we're just waiting for weather.
and the second one, I've got a green space. Are you aware of all the money that's set aside for future purchase of green space that was put aside 4 years, 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
No, and would like to know very much a lot about it.
I'm happy to come and talk to the community board about all that for you if you want at the next meeting.
I might put that up. I would like that. And I think I'd like to bring that on before our next formal meeting and make that a proper discussion.
Cool.
That would be great.
Councillor Olds.
Thanks, Louise. Thanks very much for presenting. And also, can I congratulate Greytown Community Board on their plan and their vision. I think it's beautifully done, and presents a real picture of what you're doing. I just had one question. You mentioned about pensioner housing, and it's one of these subjects that crops up from time to time about council being the right providers to provide pensioner housing. Does your community board have a view on continued commitment, financial commitment to pensioner housing in Greytown?
I would like the council to continue to have a commitment towards that. I know that there's been suggestions that it's not the avenue to go, and that we should enter conversations with Kayangaora. I'm actually going to look to do that because this is quite a key point to us. But I don't always necessarily think that the conversations with Kayangaora, we can keep focused on pensioner. And that's my point, is that we need to keep a focus on the pensioner, because we have a lot of individuals who have come to us and said, we can't stay here anymore, we're having to move out. But this is where we've lived our entire life, from baby to 60 or 70. And that shouldn't be the situation. And we have very limited. And I think we need to, like, I know we have one pensioner flat that is currently not repaired. Is that because it can't be repaired? Is that because the funds aren't going there? Those are the things we're interested in, and we want that to be focused on and looking at.
Great, thanks very much, Louise.
Right. Thank you, Louise, and we're very grateful for taking some time to come and speak to us. So now Louise on the agenda had swapped with Storm, so we'll now bring Steve.
No.
And the Martinborough Community Board presentation is on page 71, I think. And it's submission 158. So the next 10 minutes are yours, Storm.
Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to go and present. Storm Robertson, I represent here of the Martinborough Community Board, Angela as Deputy Chair. Just to give you a little bit of background, when we came into the Martinborough Community Board, we realised we didn't know much about what was really required. So for the first 12 months, we're focusing on understanding what it is the community wants. Then we'll develop plans as to what we go about trying to achieve some of those things. What we've provided today is just some general comments. Some relate to information we've picked up in our community meetings, and others are opinions of ours that we'd like clarified. So if I can start off, this is the first one that is a major issue, this community, which is the wastewater. We are concerned that there doesn't appear to be a great action plan to resolve this problem. This is a problem that's going to affect local communities, local businesses for the next 2 years that they may not be able to do any development. It's very serious and it should have an urgent tag stuck on it. It's not something that has just sprung up in front of us. It's been there for some time and we're just wanting to know what the urgent plan is. So we would be looking as an outcome of this presentation to see an urgent plan put in place at how we're going to remedy that scenario. It is very, very important, so it needs to be addressed. In a commercial sense, I would think this would be managed on a weekly basis with somebody designated to be in charge of providing information to the community about what's happening. That's our first concern. It is a major one, and that's why we put it. I understand you've all seen our submission like this, you've had a read of it so that you know what we're talking about. The second part of what we put through is to talk about this centre here. And one thing that we've uncovered with talking to the community is that it doesn't seem to be fitting a purpose. It doesn't seem to be serving the community. And we're not quite sure why that is. Is it because it's closed off in certain instances, or is it because people don't know to take opportunity that's here? So we'd like to see a wider perspective given to this facility. And now, there may be contracts involved in some of the services provided here, and we have to honour those, but we need to look into the future to say, what can we do in the future to take care of this being a good central facility? It's a great facility, it's just underutilised. And we think it needs to be more utilised by more people. And we're not going to do that unless we get people involved in it. The other one that we talk about, and this is something, again, we have to talk to our community about. Feedback of information is very important. Now, we undertook, and the Mayor was a grateful participant, in looking at our footpaths through the use by mobility scooters, wheelchairs, walking, and it was uncovered there are a number of footpaths in this area that are below standard. Now, we know the council has a plan to update and refurbish and put in new footpaths, but we don't see that plan matching the reality of what's required. So what we'd like to see is more interchange with us as a community board of what is planned. Can we influence what is planned and can we take some action on it? And so what we need to see is a greater commitment. Fine producing a plan, but let's make sure the action steps are created that everybody understands. The community needs to know that because there's a tree stump putting through a footpath in one of their locations, is somebody going to fix it? Or do they have to keep walking their mobility scooter onto the road, creating a hazard and moving off? So that's the sort of thing we want the council to perhaps give to us, is a greater feedback of what their priorities are and how we're going to address them. This is part of what the community wants to know from us. And we feel very undereducated on what it is. Now, the other thing that we have in this list is about the community roading and how we do about it. I know it's a tough ask for this part of the world. But we have had some feedback from some of the communities that if we gave them $1, they could do something. And maybe we have to look about this as an opportunity to say, instead of spending a whole lot of money on a road that we can't do much with, we may be able to tip them some money that they can create a local solution for. And I don't think we're doing that in the way we should do. We're not communicating that. We're not showing we're open to it. And that's what I think we need to be. We need to be open to the fact that we can do local things locally. And there's many communities that are saying to us that we could fix this in 5 minutes if you just give us some money. And we just don't see it. So the final submission we'd like to do is, and again, it relates to all the things we're talking about. It's called efficiency. And we know that paperwork creates problems, now computers create problems. But efficiency is, if you've got an issue, you must identify what the issues are, prioritise them, advertise them, and get on with them. And we would like to see much more efficiency coming out of the council, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and are they doing it to the requirement of the community? If they're not, why not? There may be valid reasons for not doing it that way. But there are certain things that are going on that we think this is not a priority. It shouldn't be a priority, but it's being done. So we're just wanting to say, when we put things out into the council, we need to be sure you communicate it. One of the old adages is, if you're going to do something, say it out loud and do it. If you don't say it out loud, you're keeping it to yourself, so we know what's happening. So short and sweet from me.
Thank you very much. Now with Angela, would you like to follow on?
Well, we came together as a team, and we've all obviously seen what's in this document first. And we came to it based on the information we've had from our Meet the Community Board session throughout the year. And it's really interesting because you hear the same things coming through unity and listening. And for us as new members, we've tried to understand processes so we can answer questions efficiently. So when people say, for example, with the footpaths, how does it work? How does one footpath get ahead of another footpath when it comes to maintenance? And it's difficult for us to find the information so we could answer the question quickly. So, for example, with dams and things which were needed cutting, one of the people at the council and meetings was able to tell me what the rotation was. And so someone said, my weeds are here, and I could say, that's okay, it's on the next 3-week schedule. And that was an answer we could give. We didn't have to keep them as council. And so it was actually quite productive. So I suppose for us, it's us having the information that we need, but also when we look back at some of the documentation and how things are produced, I personally find it quite hard to follow sometimes and quite difficult. So I can understand why people then come and ask me a question that they might be able to find themselves if things were a little bit easier to follow on the website, perhaps.
Thank you very much. Well, now we're going to invite councillors to ask a question. We're going to start with Councillor Olds, and I have a question. So,
Storm, thanks very much for coming along and presenting today. You mentioned about the Waihinga Centre and not serving our community. What areas are you're sort of talking about there? Because I know that we were a very active library, we've got a very active cafe out there. Is it the actual venue itself?
Well, when you say we've got a very active cafe, it closes at 1 o'clock. That's not active.
Right.
That's serving somebody else's purpose, not the community's purpose. If you come in here for a meeting at 1:30, you want a coffee while you're doing it, you can't do it. That's not a service you're providing. We're dictated to. So some of the things we've talked about and heard about is there are people that run, for example, Tai Chi. I think they share one of the facilities here, but there's other organisations like that would like to go to somewhere to have something, but they feel that either the cost to do it is prohibitive, or it's not available to them, or not open to them. And what we have to do is get the message that this centre is open for whatever you want to do. Now, it's not going to be a freebie, we understand that, but for some of those organisations, it's something we need to do. And so it's being open about what it is. At the moment, and I'll make this as my personal judgment, I came here 5 years ago and I looked at that site and thought, that looks good. But when I came in, it wasn't good. It didn't tell me what I wanted to do. It didn't help me try to do what I was trying to do. So I think, well, what is it trying to do? So maybe we've got to go back and say, who's managing it? What are we doing? And how are we getting it out there as a facility for the community?
Yep. Excellent. Thanks very much, Phil.
And I'll just follow on from Councillor Old's observation by saying, I think, speak for all the councillors when I say we would welcome your suggestions on how to deal with that issue. My question is, you said some things that you don't believe should be a priority appear to be prioritised over the things that you think should. Can you just give me one example?
I'll give you one example. The footpaths, as we know, is a terrible state in many parts of Melbourne. Greenaway is a place that's a small dead-end lane. It's had a new concrete path put on both sides of it. And that must be serving 10 people, plus those that might visit it. There's other places in more populated areas around the township that have got trees growing through the bloody footpath, excuse my language. Trees growing through the footpath that are an obstruction. You've seen them, and it's not, why isn't that a priority? Why isn't that fixed? Why was Greenaway given a priority? They have an expensive concrete path put around a dead end lane. Where did that come from?
Now, any other councillor? Okay, thanks very much. I just observed that what a difference it makes to call something a dead end versus a cul-de-sac. Thank you very much, Storm. Thank you. Okay, so the next person on our list is Daphne Geisler, and I sense she will be coming in via Zoom. And it's on page 90 to 92, and it's 162. If you're doing it, it's submission 162. So greetings, Daphne. Welcome. And the next 10 minutes are yours.
Kia ora, thank you. I saw the man get thrown out of the council meeting yesterday. I have to say, I felt his pain. I too have read the proposal and found it lacking in substance, facts and detail, and came up with flawed decisions. We're told the mayor and councillors went through the proposed budget line by line, looking at each allocation and decided that the expenditure was warranted. However, it's difficult to get any information on specifics or justification for spending. So I appreciate this opportunity to just make a few comments. First, the pause. You increase spending, but artificially lessen this year's rates by postponing some costs, pausing the loan, which means next year you start in a funding hole. The pause presumably stops next year, so you have to fund that repayment. That's a $1 million hole because you're not funding it this year. Did you choose to repay the pause? I'm told by council it'll cost 1.8 million. That's a very strange number, but it's the number they gave me. So that means an even bigger hole should you choose to repay it without 1 penny of additional costs on essential services. That's not saving anything, it's just postponing. But you say you expect central government to pay the funds to settle water debts within the next 3 years. Central government getting money from me too. You're not saving a penny, you're just transferring costs from rates to taxes. I believe central government accept councils to act in good faith, and you're consciously not paying off a loan that you had planned to, so that you can keep your spending high and limit rates increases. Ethically questionable and a big gamble. So a comment on the water. Yep, our water structure is in poor shape, but you propose reducing the amount spent on water, recognizing that this will put community health at risk. Or was it just a silly proposal, scare tactics, expecting that the urban community would beg you to do a proper job maintaining our water? And then they'd almost demand you increase rates. Then you could stand aside, wash your hands of having to make real, proper operational savings, give you the ability to fund our essential services. So I say no to the lowest rates and highest risk option, but also no to making us dig deeper. And yes, to finding savings in the operations of council and maintaining a healthy water supply. So on to cost savings. You've increased operational costs by 5 million. That's a 20% increase. This seems insane in today's economic reality. Ratepayers have found ways to reduce their personal and business budgets to cope with inflation and their ongoing needs. You must do the same. You must save money, make real sustainable savings in your overheads and operational areas. You have the leadership role to set direction, strategy and budget. You might, if you repeat, budgets have been kept low across the board enough times, as in the document, emails and frequently asked questions, that it will become a reality. Well, it won't. You need to go back to the drawing board, and this time when you do your line by line review, reduce spending. There's a difference in the increase for rural and urban general rates, something that a lot of us have been trying to grapple with. You state urban is reduced by a $200,000 saving due to no new urban footpaths. But the annual plan last year shows capital funds of $810,000 for new footpaths. New footpaths were a capital cost last year, and we were told capital costs are not funded by rates. So tell me again why the rural general increase is so much higher than urban. So just as an aside on that 70-30 split urban and rural, in effect, the total land value in rural zones happens to be larger than the total land value in urban zones. In effect, all urban and rural pay the same factor on these items. The cost is divided by land value to get the factor. If there truly is a 70-30 split for rural, then the rural factor should be exactly the same as the urban, other than for items that are 100% allocated. Focusing on the 70-30 makes it seem as if one rural ratepayer is carrying a higher cost than one urban ratepayer. They're not. It's based on their land value, regardless of location. Taking a 70-30 allocated item serves only to pitch urban versus rural. Please stop it. Libraries. You threaten that libraries will close without an additional 165,000 for casual staff. The increase in budget for libraries is actually over 500,000 with no explanation, giving a total budget of 1.5 million. And this doesn't even include books, which I think are capital costs. So I say no to the 165. There are a multitude of ways to staff the libraries for casual cover. Go back to the drawing board, stop the heavy scare tactics and get creative and explain what the 500,000 is for. You've got $1 million increase in resourcing, which is staffing costs. I was told it related in part to the pro-Maori position and bringing the Maori Standing Committee in line with community boards. But both of these items were resolved by council in 2021. So they'll be included in the base budget and require no large additional funds other than inflation. We're told long-term plan costs form part of the increase. But last year's budget already included funds for one-off items such as the election, the rates review, representation review. So just what is that $1 million additional being spent on? You show over 500,000 in building control made up of 233,000 of reduced income. Logic would say that if income, fee from developers, is reduced, then work is also reduced. So why increase costs by 500,000? What are we paying for here? You have an other category, other costs of over $1 million with no specific details. Are you happy to give oversight to a slush fund of $1 million? So overall, the mayor says he's listening to feedback and yet can promote an idea to engage staff in additional work to develop a proposal to take over Highway 53 in Martinborough. Loading council staff with this investigation, ratepayers the additional costs, and council with ongoing servicing tells me he may not be listening. He may be listening, but he's not hearing. It's almost like he's busy painting streets. You need to take cost savings seriously. It appears you have no desire to keep rates affordable and deliver essential services and value for money. A $5 million increase in spending is irresponsible. Pausing a loan is short-sighted, and it'll cost me more in the long term. Reducing community water safety is almost criminal. Asking for us to approve your proposal with such scanty detail is insulting and not what was promised when you won the privilege of serving on council. Yeah, the gentleman yesterday got agitated and was thrown out. But believe me, there are thousands who have just given up. They tell me there's no point in commenting, but I'm crazy to keep interested. Please prove them wrong. I think you need sharper pencils and more guts. Please take the time to redo this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daphne. Just one comment I will make is that I think you said somewhere that we're planning to reduce our water budget. In actual fact, the $3.5 million is not a reduction, it's the figure that comes out of the long-term plan. Now, councillors, do we have any questions?
Just over last year's budget.
We don't. Okay, thanks very much, Daphne, and we look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you. Now, the next person on our list is the Featherston Community Board. Their submission is on page 93 and it's number 167. And I sort of feel here we've got a bit of a competition going on between Featherston and Greytown as to who can have the the most elegant community board plan. Anyway, welcome Tui, kia ora, and the next 10 minutes are yours.
Kia ora koutou, and I'm Hinui kia koutou. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to our Featherston community plan, and apologies I wasn't online for the Greytown one, which I think was a couple of presentations ago. But I thought I'd talk to how we landed the plan rather than the detail of the plan. There's plenty in there, but we'll take more than 10 minutes to talk through. So I talked to the principles of how we came to it. And basically the logic of our plan is to have, whilst we are looking at short-term and mid-term work priorities such as annual plan budgets, community budgets to allocate for tasks and projects around the community. The goal is for us to have an underpinning long-term evaluation framework by which to test those to make sure that we are doing things that are for the net benefit of the community in the long term. So, excuse me, the way we approached that was by, well, we workshopped this through with the Featherston Community Board on a number of sessions, and then we've had more detailed round tables since then. And we've come through with three main if you like, principles by which our planning is based. The first being, and I have to thank Warren for developing the Māori translations of these objectives. The first one is Kia Puawai, which is developing and building on the character and strength of the community as it exists now and looking to preserve those and the integrity of that community that we are representing. The second is Kia Tua Kia Tato, which is preserving that for the purposes of benefit of the future generations, for our grandchildren, was a tagline that we had at one point, but certainly for the future generations, so that what gets handed to them is better than the one we inherited over time, and for the same principles to apply for future community boards as well. And the third one is Kia Manaki Taio, which is to preserve and improve our natural environment. So you'll read, if you've read through this at all, there's a lot about greening the community, sponge city logic around building more intense green environments, but also maintaining the integrity of the plantings in a way that preserves the ecology that was there prior to human habitation, bearing in mind that Featherston sits on land that wasn't actually, it was up until 1850 was in fact very similar to the Wairarapa Moana area before the earthquake uplift, but making sure that we're preserving the green planting to suit and restore a lot of that natural environment, with a goal to connecting the forests of the rimatakas to the plants and ecology of the wetlands in a way that supports both the flood mitigation and integrity of the town, but also the restoration of those natural environments. And so I guess the whole point of this whole plan is around being able to take a short-term task or an approach for funding to the, that comes to us at the community board, whether it be a short-term several months turnaround or a 3-year plan or a longer-term plan, and work out whether that actually meets and supports these objectives for the Featherston community. And for ideally for future community boards, we're not telling them how to do their job, but that they would then have a framework to continue that if they so chose to do, to help preserve Featherston Paitamokai. For so it does, excuse me, in spite of the growth that's very likely to occur, that we maintain the integrity of that community that Featherstonians certainly take a huge amount of pride in, and provide mechanisms for sensible planning for social housing, more intense housing and population bases, the ability to retain and encourage jobs and income for the region in a way that doesn't compromise those principles of the community, and for ways that encourage future generations to stay and continue to build on Featherston and maintain it. So there's a lot of different individual items that we workshopped in the plan there. I won't go through them all, but they're very much about drawing on the community input. And it's worth acknowledging as part of this plan that there are many other organisations within Featherston who have already done extensive community engagement and planning. And our goal is not to supplant or replace any of those, it's to actually draw on all those and provide a centre point for a lot of those pieces of work, and connecting the dots whether it be the business community, whether it be community beautification, or whether it be community resilience and disaster recovery. I know Paul's a particular fan of that particular topic. And certainly it's a fundamental part of our planning to make sure that that community has the ability to survive and thrive regardless of the challenges that get put in front of it. So I guess that's the underlying principle of the plan itself. I spoke at a very high level on that, but I'm happy to take questions on detail if you'd like to.
Right. Oh, well, no, Mehi, thank you very much for that. So we've got several minutes and we'll start with Councillor Plimmer.
Yeah, hi, Toby. Thank you very much. Look, I'm just looking through your submission. The work away from, there's one that I see there, motorways through the middle of town. Is the community board proposing in the long term for a bypass of State Highway 2?
No, it wasn't that specific. It was just that there was a lot of horror stories in other parts of the world of small towns that had great centres that then over time the infrastructure that was developed wasn't sympathetic to the community and ended up removing the centre of the town or the community. Our goal is, I don't know that we have any feasible ways of easily bypassing the town, but certainly making sure that what transport infrastructure is there doesn't compromise the town itself.
Has that been raised with Russell with the master planning of Featherston to look at that? You know, if we're looking at something like that in the next 20 or 30 years, it needs to get into the plan now so that those sort of ideas can be submitted up the chain to Waka Kotahi now, because they may be looking at a 20 or 30 year horizon.
Not specifically yet, but it's a very good pickup for us to do so. And I know, and Russell is our council rep at our Featherston Community Board meeting, so it's an ideal opportunity for us to probably have some time with him and talk through the connections between those plans.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor,
Can I just make a compliment as well, because I did compliment Greytown on their plan, and I'd like to compliment those that that helped construct this as well. So a very well presented document and a very good vision. Thank you.
Right. I think probably that's it. So thank you very much, Tui. Obviously, you did a great job, and we thank you very much and look forward to seeing you again at our table. Thank you. Good. Now, the next person on my list is Federated Farmers, and I'm welcoming Elizabeth. So are you on your own, Elizabeth? Well, then come and we don't bite. So we're very welcome. And we're looking forward very much to your presentation, which starts on page 103 and it's submission 96. So as soon as I get my clock reset, the next 10 minutes are all yours. Go.
Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. So I'm Liz Gotti. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor with Federated Farmers based here in the Wairarapa, and very much appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to our submission. It's relatively brief, folks, as you'll see, and I'm sure that you haven't read the submissions, so I'll just touch on a couple of the key points. And very mindful that there's two things really on the table, as it were. One is the annual plan, which is principally about the quantum of rates increases that are proposed, and very importantly, right alongside it, the rating review that councillor, I think, have had on the go for some time. So briefly in respect of the first, I'll probably just up front make a comment that, of course, Federated Farmers has no difficulty whatsoever with rates per se, as a mechanism for the community to share collective costs, efficiencies of scale, many hands make light work. Rates as a mechanism for funding local activities for local communities, the concept's absolutely sound. And I'd just also like to say up front that we do appreciate the difficulties for South Wairarapa. You are a relatively small council with a relatively small voting base, a big geographic area, 3 townships, lots of roads. So appreciate that challenging context that you're working within. Turning to our submission, of course, what's on the table, and it has attracted huge interest in the rural sector, is the proposed near enough 30% rates increase. And I think if I'm correct, and please correct me if I've misunderstood, the LTP indicated something a lot more modest. So that 30% increase has inescapably caught our attention. The consultation document was actually a little light on explaining the reasons for that increase. There seem to be two broad categories. Roughly half of the $5 million increase was factors like inflation and insurance, and we can certainly acknowledge that those are driven by external pressures. Roughly the other half, the other $2.5 million, seem to be factors that were much more inside council control. The explanations associated with resourcing council, IT and other costs were quite sketchy. Again, I acknowledge that council has gone to some effort in the frequently asked questions to explain because people are confused and concerned. Big picture, our recommendation in that section is that to the extent that there are costs outside council's control, and we acknowledge that there are things like inflation insurance that are driven externally, difficult to argue. But for those costs that are inside council control, particularly increases of the magnitude that you're proposing here, we're suggesting that the LTP process next year, it's only a year away, that is potentially the more appropriate place to work through the substantive reasons and justification and line-by-line analysis of why increases need to stay in as part of that all-community process that you will be having next year. Turning now to rating impact analysis, big compliment to South Wairarapa District Council. You do an excellent job of presenting the rating impact analysis. You disaggregate by sector, you disaggregate for the big rural sector, you disaggregate the lifestylers from the commercial farms, you disaggregate by value of property. I think that's excellent, and that's a model that I would recommend to other councils to follow. It would be strengthened, and I'll come back to this point in a moment, it would be strengthened, I think, with more reporting, more transparency around the contributions that those different ratepayers are making, ratepayer groups, to the rating tape. I'll come back to that point. Revenue and financing policy review, again, a big compliment to South Wairarapa District Council that you have indeed commissioned, I think, some wee while ago, what I understand is intended to be a first principle grading review. Hats off to you guys, because there's any number of councils who might just proceed from year to year and LTP to LTP and tinker around the edges, but never actually step away from the plate and come back in on a first principle basis. So every compliment to South Wairarapa District Council for embarking on that piece of work. We do want to emphasise, and the fact that you've commissioned it means that I'm probably saying what doesn't need to be said, but I just do want to emphasise that the need for that to be a really robust and transparent community process. Certainly the Local Government Act expects that will be so. The Productivity Commission recommended that in a process like that, that generally speaking, and they're not obviously talking directly about South Wairarapa, but the Productivity Commission recommending that council decision-making in general needs to be more visible to stakeholders. And that includes information about how councils are allocating rates across the different ratepayer groups. And related to your first principles review, of course, Marston and Carterton are also kicking off, I think they're a bit behind you guys, but they're kicking off rating reviews also, which are intended to inform next year's LTP. And we would just like to encourage, and I've had this conversation briefly with the other councils, we just really would like to encourage our three local councils, Marston, Carterton, South Wairarapa, to share, and I'm sure that you do share and collaborate in your thinking And really, it's just in the context that, you know, the Wairarapa as a unit, we are a bit of a unit. And those thorny questions about, you know, the roading network and how do we grapple with the challenge of funding the roading network. Carbon forestry is another one that I've mentioned here. That's an upcoming big potential challenge in terms of how, and those matters that I think would usefully, the three councils would get together to share thinking. So just concluding, and just to say again that we really do acknowledge the challenges that the environment that you're operating in. And in particular, there's a small population here in the South Wairarapa district. And then having said that, really do want to emphasise that the farming sector, of course, is a very small subset of that small population. And I'm just reiterating again the need for that rating review to be really robust and transparent, and to include analysis of options and scenarios by sector and group. Now, we made that recommendation in the submission, and I have a little one-pager with your permission.
Certainly.
I'll just pass something away. Let's pass it on this way. And it's just so it's just setting out here a bit of a template for and the example I've used at the top there is the now these numbers are not firm, they're illustrative, but for the general rate, my understanding is that the total general rate is something of the order of about 7 million. We've got something around 7,000, I think, rateable properties in the district, roundabout, rounding it off for simplicity. So at face value, if the general rate was applied across all 7,000 properties, then potentially around $1,000 each. But that next section, disaggregating by the resident in the urban, we've got two broad groups. We've got the residents, the larger, and then a smaller number of business properties. And in the rural area, we've got a bigger group of lifestyle blocks and a smaller group of commercial farms, be that pastoral, arable, horticulture. So I'm guessing at the numbers there, folk. But if there are perhaps something around 4,000 residential properties in the district, the current rate contribution from one of your documents is something under 2 million, then that's roughly around, on average, $500 each. For business, I'm guessing, might be 500. Their contribution is something a bit less than $500,000, according to one of your documents. And that makes it around $1,000 each. Then I get very sketchy with the lifestyle and farm properties. I'm pretty sure there's a lot more lifestyle blocks than there are commercial farms. I'm guessing that there might be 2,000. I'm guessing that they might be contributing 2 million of the, I know that the urban rural split is roughly 2 million for urban, roughly 5 million for the rural category. But whereas you do an excellent job of disaggregating individual rating impact by lifestyle, farmer, etc., what I'm asking is, can you provide the aggregated analysis for those groups? What's the number of rateable units in those groups? What's the rating contribution to the collective pool? And on average, what does that amount to per property? This example that I've used here for the general rate, if we might have something around 500 odd commercial farms, if in total might be contributing around 3 million to the general rate, then that would suggest that the average per farm property is around $6,000, which would be an order of magnitude greater than those other three categories. Now, I'm not saying that these numbers are solid, because I don't have the numbers. I don't have the numbers of the rateable properties to populate this with. You, of course, have those numbers at your fingertips. And I'm just presenting that illustrative example for this purpose of having the conversation, because we mentioned in our submission that we're certainly aware that some farm properties in this district pay very high rates.
Look,
Our perception would be that the farming group in total perhaps pays over and above, but it's only a perception. This sort of analysis would be hugely helpful.
so we can easily help there, I think.
Yeah.
We've got a minute or two we can set aside for questions. And I'll start with Councillor Rolls, and then I have a question on behalf of an absent councillor, and then we'll go to.
We might need to check that we might not have the same.
Oh, okay. Then. So the absent councillor obviously doesn't trust one of us. Councillor Rolls.
Liz, thanks very much for your presentation, and thanks for highlighting a little bit of detail there. Obviously, we'll do a little bit of work around that as well with our officers. I'm just wondering what Fed Farmers' view is on local government reform. And you talked briefly about sharing information across the 3 district councils, but I'm quite keen to hear what Fed Farmers' view is on local government reform.
That's a great big, it's a wonderful, great big question there, Colin. Are you thinking locally, as in the Wairarapa environment, or the bigger picture?
Oh, I guess locally, because.
Okay, in which case I'd have to probably go back to the last time we had a good crack at looking at this, and that was that. It's quite a number of years ago now, when there were moves afoot for Wairarapa to boldly amalgamate itself, and I think there were one school of thought said the Wairarapa should be a unitary, and at the time Go to Wellington said no, you fellas can't afford it, you haven't got the population. Well, actually, our population has increased quite significantly. I think we were missing the magic 10,000 at that time. Well, we've actually got that extra 10,000 now, I'm pretty sure. Colin, I can't give you a definitive view. What I can say is that Federated Farmers in the Wairarapa, of course, is well aware of what's going on in that bigger national space. What does it mean for local government nationally, locally? What does it mean for TAs locally? And what might be a pathway forward for the Wairarapa to have confidence in ourselves as a district and our future.
Thanks, Liz. I appreciate that.
I have got 2 questions on behalf of Councillor Elams, who has had to leave this afternoon. So his first one, he just wanted to better understand your views on the concept of first principles rate review. So it's something that we understand ourselves to be doing, but I think his intent is just to make sure that your understanding of that and ours align.
Yes, good. Thank you for the question. So my understanding of a first principles review is it's back to basics. That you don't just roll over endlessly or titivate around the edges the current rating policy, that you do in fact go back to basics. Another council which actually has had a crack at this quite recently is in fact GW. And councillors might be aware that last year GW, and again they've been leading up to their LTP also, last year they had a good hard look at the targeted rates, and currently they've actually been having a good hard look at the general rate. And as part of that process, and they have run, in my view, a good consultative, transparent process as part of that for each and all of the activity areas. It's going back to those principles in the Local Government Act and thinking about private and public benefits and working through in quite a systematic way for each of those setting aside the current settings. And I notice in your frequently asked questions that in several places you allude to, well, this is the current situation, folks, you know, be it the animal control or be it the pavements or be it CV or LV. In several places you allude to, well, this is the current situation, folks, under the current rating policy. And we're looking at it as part of the review. Yeah.
I think we're on the same page.
Yep.
I think that will make Councillor Elam's
Second question.
happy. And the second question is within your submission, you speak to carbon valuations.
Yes.
And Councillor Elam's is just really keen to get a better understanding of the definition of that.
Yep.
And any example that you can give within New Zealand where
Yep.
that carbon valuation is.
This is a new one. This is a new one, and I have to actually acknowledge Mr. Rutherford and behind us here, who in fact was the first person to bring it to my attention. And I have subsequently found out that in at least one other neighbouring council, that it goes back to valuations, and in a hill country area, which perhaps used to be, you know, all pastoral farming, and we're all, you know, well aware of the fact that, you know, great creeks are going into declines for carbon forestry. At the point where the valuations are done, the valuations on those carbon blocks are potentially different and higher to the valuation of that same land as a traditional extensive pastoral property. And the case that I'm aware of elsewhere, the effect of the change in valuations, here was a farm with a heap of carbon forestry going on around. The effect of the change in valuations meant the rates went up not by, you know, a few dollars or a few hundred, but multiple thousands of dollars, and whammo, just like that, by virtue of. So this is a new thing that in my understanding is that has been challenged. This is a new thing, and it's just something that we've become aware of. And it's one where I think it would benefit, it's not a South Wairarapa matter. You know, this affects, you know, all three of our local councils. Just to be aware that when the next set of valuations come out, what might that do to distort valuations and its impact on rates? Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. We've actually shot quite a long way over.
Tease that out a little bit.
Go.
So I'm really, because that was carbon question was one I was going to raise as well.
Yeah.
When we get valuations, is Federated Farmers going to have a position about how councils, you know, we get the valuation from QV.
Yeah.
Put it in the system.
Yeah.
We don't then go and look at each individual property, say, oh, we agree with that valuation or not, or we don't analyze it
Yeah.
because of this issue.
Yeah.
We don't. It's a new thing. Is Federated Farmers going to have a position on how this could be?
And again, thank you for the question, because this actually could be quite a biggie. I don't know yet, but it could be. I won't pretend to be Federated Farmers rating expert. We have got a rating expert. Nigel Billings is based in up north. So we are, when I say we, that's the royal we, Federated Farmers, we're aware of this as a potential upcoming and could be big issue. But as I say, it's very new. So will Feds be taking an interest when that most definitely yes. And as to what the options and remedies are, I will be taking advice from our rating experts.
So you'll definitely be coming back to when we go for consultation on our rating review. You'll definitely have something to add into that about this, because it's
depending on how it plays out. Yeah, it's a little bit of a wait and see game to see how does this play out. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Now, as I was just about to comment, we're actually about a quarter of an hour late at this stage, but we're keen to hear from Pat. So, who specifically asked that he would speak after you, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, folks.
Thanks, Liz.
So welcome, Dan.
Thank you all for the opportunity to speak.
You might like to introduce your companion.
Beside me, I have Kate Reedy. Kate is by birth a Cameron, and with her brothers and sister farm to our north at Pahal, Glendhu. Kate's a real worker, vet nurse by background, manages a very good pack of dogs, fences, but it worries me that the pressures will break even the best of us.
Well, thank you for that and welcome, Kate. And for the benefit of councillors, Dan's submission is 171 and it's on page 107 of my document. So Dan, the next 10 minutes are yours.
Thank you. I appreciate that there may be some expectation that you'll get from me in air bashing. Indeed, an informant very close to council gave me the heads up on a 29% rates increase. And I said in response, well, you know, there will be a riot. And that person pulling my leg said, well, it better be a good one. So that's why I say there's an expectation. Now, I start off in a collaborative way and thank you all for the commitment that by 1 July 2024, there will be a completed rates, first principles rates review in an independent fashion, and it will be implemented. Do I hear anyone disagreeing at this table?
I think it's better if you gave your submission and we'll ask you the questions.
If you were to argue with me on that point, I would be walking out.
Don't tempt us, Dan. Don't tempt us.
Nothing achieved thereby. So thank you. But my submission, of course, is that justice delayed is justice denied. In our case, this 29% rates increase is going to swallow $11,000 of net income, and for Pahal, it's $9,500. Already, it's way out of the box. Now, I'm describing this as a crisis because with a present valuation of $1,900 odd by dividing hectares into our land value, that 1,900 will go past 10,000. I'm probably understating the value of carbon. That means all things being equal, we'll be paying district council rates past $250,000. Well, I say at this table, I'm not going slowly. And if that be taken as a declaration of war, then that's the state of my mind. But this is no flash in the pan. Since 2020, I have been highlighting the common issue of carbon, and I've been saying it very quietly, very deliberately. So the council has to settle down and listen to the concern of myself and neighbours, or you'll be doing no more business. Now, that's a pretty dramatic thing to say, but by decisions by default of previous councils, this is where we have ended. And I made a deliberate decision 4 or 5 weeks ago that I had to throw my dignity to the wind and speak to the media. And I have a few more articles in mind. It's a slow education of the general public that it's a pretty serious thing when council ignore the law. And it's a pretty serious thing when that occurs year after year. Now, there's not been some deep thinking going on, but I've quietly withheld 6 instalments of rates. And I know where that heads, and it heads to the High Court. And you've got to make a very calm decision as to whether we meet somewhere in the middle or whether we meet outside Molesworth Street. As I say, the Times Age will be reporting that I've withheld rates on 6 instalments, and that should be a wake-up call. Now, in my submission, it's a pretty steep task I've set myself to, first of all, thank you for the commitment for an honesty in rates, but then say we can't just wait 12 months. Justice delayed is justice denied. Now, I have recently received a partial official information request which says up to the present there's been no legal advice taken. That concerns me. It concerns me also that the longer this thing goes on, the fiduciary period is 14 years. You're playing serious poker with the future of the council and ratepayers. Now, and I say for 250,000, quite apart from myself, there are other lawyers in this district who are thinking just the same way. Simple arithmetic. Why has this happened? Because Tar-White and also Tar-Hell are statistical outliers. So we're impacted unduly and still not getting any benefits back. It's common sense. You pay your rates, you get benefits. And it's also common sense that the more distance you are from the council, you'll get no benefits. I would comment, thinking of collaborative solutions, that at the Tutumeri meeting, I met newly elected councillor Woodcock, and I like his direct determination to think how we can do the roading issue better. I look forward to working with him. Now, essentially, and I turn quickly to my own submission, I say that the root of the problem is the so-called Viv Napier 2018 rates review. Despite many requests, I've yet to see any documents relating to that. But it's important for you all at the table to appreciate this is an inherited problem, and I'm not wishing to be unpleasant to any individual councillor, nor to any officer. However, in the case of officers, I do say that in New Zealand society today, anyone paid over $100,000 is public property.
Excuse me, Dan.
There should be accountability.
Excuse me, Dan. You may indeed continue, but I do wonder if you would like to share your time with Kate.
Of course, can I just wrap and quickly?
So the 10 minutes are yours.
Okay, and then Kate will speak. I say, do read my paragraph 1 carefully, that if the council is in legal danger because of the weak Viv Napier benefits review, the sooner you knock that on the head, to that extent of 12 months, you're out of danger in terms of the fiduciary period. So I say, stop now, take a big breath, 3 months, do an honest rates review. And while it will be uncomfortable, I honestly promise you'll have support from the farming community. And I'm glad Councillor Woodcock is noting that down, because the times are going to get worse. In my submission of 2020, I was telling you we were entering a times of diminishing purchasing power, and now we as farmers are right in the vice. Livestock returns down, costs, inflation to us 16.5. I've been there in the 1980s. We survived a debt servicing ratio of 39%. I have more friends now, and it's through friends you survive. Many more friends. So do read my paragraph 1. And then in paragraph 2, I turn my attention to the question of interim relief, which can be delivered this week. And the most immediate thing I see is a change from land value to capital valuation. That is within your power.
Okay,
And
excuse me, Dan, that is your 10 minutes.
of course it is.
I am going to give, no, that's,
One sentence.
no, Dan,
It is
Dan.
multi-consultation.
that is your,
I'm finished.
I just wish to say something on behalf of Viv Napier. I'm sure, like me, she would wish that mayors had all that power that you have ascribed to her in her time as mayor, but in actual fact, the rating review you refer to was not hers, it was the council's. We work by majority. So Kate, would you like to tell us what you would like us to know?
Hello and thank you. Yes, yeah, so I will be brief. I'm not sure how much more time I have.
How much would you like?
No, just a couple of minutes is all I need. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as you're aware, we farm at Power Station, which is north of Dan Ridderford. My family has been on that farm since 1840. It's a large coastal station. Last July 20, June 21, our rates were $28,000. That moved up to $35,000 from 1st of July 21 to 30th of June 22. And I calculated that if the increase was to go ahead, we're looking at paying potentially $37,000 in rates. Now, our farm is not overly productive. We have 70% of our farm covered in mature scrub. So it's pretty hard to earn a living off that. And yeah, so my concern is that we're getting charged per hectare in rates, not in our productivity. So I agree with Liz's statement with the first principle rating review urgently needed for people like ourselves who are struggling to make a living. We cannot get the carbon credits. Our scrub is over pre-1990, so if you know the rules and regulations of carbon credits, it's we cannot get the carbon from that scrub. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. There's a lot of farmers now where we are. It's just incredibly uneconomical for us. It would rate us off the farm if these rates were to go ahead. So we've been struggling for a while, and especially with the introductions of the regulations from the government that we're facing, high inflation, just to add to all the insult. It is extremely tough times for farmers, and we just cannot continue. I fear we'd be rated off our land. So the issue comes back to the roads. And some of the things that we've been witnessing where we are is just eye-watering with the waste of money on the roading, especially where we are through Hinakura. We haven't had a road for a whole year. Our transport costs have gone through the roof because we have to have trucks come through an Admiral Road, which adds an hour and a half to travel. But some of the things that we've witnessed is I've got a list a mile long of the roading. It's just mismanaged as far as I'm concerned. For example, where I was bringing some stock home we had a truck coming to load our lambs to take them away. And we had a digger driver had come out to fix the culvert that had been washed out. And I was really excited. I was like, oh yay, because we had a truck come in the next day. And I stopped to talk to him, and he said he was not actually replacing the culvert. He was just pushing the dirt to one side so that cars could get through. And I kind of panicked, and I said to him, well, what do I do? We really need to throw it over for the trucks, you know. And he said, you have to ring Langley. Tim, thank you. So I shot back to the house and I rang Tim and I asked him, could you, you know, how can I get this digger? There's a 20-ton digger, I think. It's huge, you know, it would have taken hours to get to Pahau. And I said, how do I get this resolved? And I rang Tim and he said, yep, no, tell the digger driver he can fix it. So I shot back on my bike, you know, I left the mob of sheep halfway. And I said to him, could you please replace the culvert? And he said, great. You know, I said, Tim had given him permission. So he said, yeah, I can do that now. So why is that sort of thing happening, that they don't just do this job when they're there? You know, it would have taken 2 hours for a truck to take that digger out to Pahau. But these are just issues that we're seeing time and time again. The other issues is it's coming across workers that are asleep. I mean, I've lost count how many times I've seen people. We had residents held up for an hour on top of the Hinakura Hill because the guy that was controlling the stop-go lights was sound asleep. He was sound asleep. So these issues are huge. Where's the accountability? Somebody must be in charge of that. I don't know. That's coming from you guys.
Well, in the end, the people you're looking at here are accountable for everything that happens in this district. So you're talking to the right people. Councillors, does anyone have a question at this stage? Okay. Oh, Woody, one from you.
Thank you two very much for coming in. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just curious, Kate, how many acres is your farm? Hectares? Or?
It's about 8,500 hectares.
1,000 hectares. What's yours, Dan?
We're 6,500 hectares.
Oh, we must.
Yes. Just curious to look at how you say.
An important point is we're 80% greywacke, like the Rimataka saddle. The soil science is whatever you do with greywacke soil, you'll not produce more than 2,500 kilos of dry matter per hectare, and all falling over a narrow summer period.
So how much land of yours is productive and what sort of scrub or bush?
The real productive core is about 1,200 hectares, yep, which is argillitic soil type.
Yep.
But there's no hay country or croppable country, and which makes us difficult to be a top quartile farmer in terms of animal production.
Sorry, ours is probably 4,800 hectares, sorry, thinking acres.
Okay, thank you. I still get confused over here.
Yeah.
But anyway, look, thank you, the two of you, and appreciate the time, because obviously it's taken you some time to get. Do appreciate that. Now, the last submission is from Susan Finlayson.
Thank you.
So I'll invite Susan up for the. Oh, sorry, Gordon. I was jumping the gun. Gordon, welcome.
I'm in the hot seat.
You're in the hot seat. You are. Welcome, Gordon. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And
oh yeah, well, you can call me Bert. That's the name I'd rather be called by. Sometimes I got to use my.
Yeah, mothers have got a lot to answer.
Name for some reasons.
Welcome.
Yeah, I've lived all my life at Tora. That's been my life and soul, except for 15 years I spent in Western Australia when farming got too much, so I moved off to do something else in my life. But I'm back here now, and you know, a lot of what's been happening at Tora and, you know, in a situation pretty close to the heart. Today, I'm also here to support what Dan Rutherford had to say, because the rates business is a little bit tough. But I'll just go through what my submission. I assume everybody's read it. I just most of what a lot of what I've got to say is to do with roading and the situation with the condition of the roads and how things you know, get done. You know, as I see it, the maintenance on the road is getting going downhill. Years back, it was obviously more money. I think a lot of things got done, but you know, a lot of the little things seem to be getting left, and they end up being a huge cost. You know, we're talking water tables don't get cleaned for 2 years. The water doesn't run down the water table, comes up in the middle of the road, like it is at Tar White Road near the RPS subdivision. There's a huge patch now that'll be dug out like this metal cut, and God only knows. The water table over there doesn't work. The culvert is 20 metres down the road. And the Tora Gorge is another huge concern of mine, because that is our access. It's very steep, and it's problematic. And some of the things that are in there are simple fixes, but creating huge problems that can never be fixed over the side. A lot of this work, I see could be done by, you know, contracts for smaller machinery. We don't have to wait for 14-ton diggers to arrive in the district to clean out one culvert at a. You know, it's a huge expense to see a truck trailer, huge excavator, traffic management, Christ only knows what. It was probably about 3 or 4 bucketfuls out of the end of the culvert that works again. At what huge cost? Okay, you know, I realise that traffic management is another major issue on this, but you know, while we're waiting for somebody to come and clean that culvert, the water was running across the road. It was a huge lake, and it was getting deeper and deeper, and it was like the water like this. You know, I saw a car come through it. It was just about up with a bumper. The culvert's not working, the road's flooded. As soon as it goes through to a bog hole, something happens. And like weeks and weeks before anybody even did anything about fixing it. You know, I've also, of course, been down the White Rock Road and had a look through all the roads around the area, and you know, they too have got their share of problems down there, and a hell of a lot of what they've got is subsidence over the side, which is, you know, unfixable. You look over the edge, it's like Tora Gorge, it's forever down. And you know, the Tora Gorge has got that massive, you know, subsidence on the side. I asked, you know, what is going to be done about that? Is there anything going to be done about widening that piece of road? I think the questions need to be asked. We've got a panel of rails round a dropout on a corner. That extremely dangerous situation. Now the rails are falling over the side, and there's just a cone between somebody going over the edge and somebody not going over the edge. And you know, the rails are obviously up on the edge, but it's now fallen away, it's gone. And in the gorge itself, there's water running across the road. It's been running across the road now for the 2 years I've been back from Australia. Somebody told me, oh, I've been running across the road for years, but it never used to. It's a simple fix, because there's a pipe that goes into the culvert, sticks up in the air. I don't know how much you might get it down if you dug it out, maybe 100, 150 mils, but nobody does it. So therefore the water down there doesn't go down the culvert, runs across the road over the bank. There's a bloody great ditch being scoured into the road, which is unfixable. It's like, I don't know how far it is down to the river, I haven't measured. You know, these are the things that, you know, I take a bit of an issue of. That pipe in particular could probably be fixed by 2 guys, 2 shovels, maybe a pick just in case it was a little bit underneath a spirit level and a ute. And it's in a 30k zone already. So I don't know how much traffic management you need to have to protect those guys. You know, I stopped there and walked around there and I should have taken a shovel, I could have dug the thing out. Never even saw a car come by. Yeah, I then made an issue here about the flooding at Tutamuri, that low patch. It is a particularly sensitive issue. I realise there's so much people say can't be done, but it's done in 1967. The bridge was built in 1967. I remember it being just a little one-way road. They carted the gravel out of the river with Euclids and put it on the road, and it's lasted all these years. And now the Rapu swamps eye level and the river's eye level, and it fills up with water. We have to drive through it in our utes, and I've certainly been through it with the water pretty high that I didn't really like doing. And there's already been vehicles in there broken down. And the road surface now is breaking up. And of course, we've got logging trucks hammering shit out of it all the time. And it is a safety issue for the coastal areas for White Rock, Tar White. You know, in the event you're having a flood, you're also having an event where somebody has an accident, a medical issue. Helicopter quite often can't get out of Wellington. You can't get through the river. We're fording a river to come to town in the middle of winter with 20 mils of rain. You know, I'm just not sure what has to be done to get something like that stretch of road, but certainly it's got to be on the list. And just as an interim measure, it would be nice if somebody put some marker boards there with a measurement on it. So at least when you go up there, you know the water's 200, 500, a metre deep. So you know your vehicle's going to be able to handle and drive through it. I don't have to be a rocket scientist. They're all over Australia, everywhere. And over there, you think, what the hell are they doing here? But when it rains, it floods. Yeah, and I would like to see a copy of Fulton Hogan's contract on it. I'd be interesting to know what they do and what they're supposed to do. Just a matter of interest. Yeah, I'm a bit interested to know where all the money's been spent. Yeah, you know, we do pay a lot of rates, and as I see it, the last few years, there's been nothing more spent on the road than general maintenance, grading, general stuff. I do note that it was at the meeting the other night, Tutamuri, there was $1 million or something to be spent out on our road. Where to go? You know, and if you're doing, you know, that sort of maintenance because of flood issues and things, you know, do you get a subsidy from Whakatahi to go towards it? Which means that, is that $1 million included as a subsidy, or is that $1 million plus a subsidy? Where to go? I'd be interested to know. Over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of subdivision going on in the area, down at my place and up at Arpia. There's about 35 sections been sold there. $7,500 contribution to the roading and reserves to the council. And I could just about say nothing extra has been done on our road for just visibility. Okay, we had the mulch there now, or something. I got money off the council to do some roading back in 2006 before I left for Australia. They threw me $20,000. I made every cent of it go into that road. And the maintenance I did along the sides and that just went back into scrap and nobody did one thing about keeping up what was kept up.
Thank you, Bert. We've come almost to the end of our time, but councillors might have a question, so we'll just shoot round the room quickly. We do. Councillor Woodcock.
Thanks for coming, Bert. Just curious question, because you live out on a gravel road section. Would you be happy to go back to how it used to be, where you're using the gravel screened out of the river, straight out of the river on the back of the truck onto the roads, rather than carting the crushed, supposedly better quality gravel all the way down at 3 times the cost?
Well, I don't know what the quality of that gravel is in the river anymore. It used to be okay. I used to get it from up there, the other side of the side of Tutamuri, where it was coarser type gravel. And I think last year they were carting it out of maybe out of Braggers on the poorer side of the Tutamuri turn off, and they were putting it on the road. It was a layer of gravel that was there, it was graded, it was fine, you know. You cart gravel from miles away, you can only get a fraction of the amount of gravel delivered as what you can if you've got trucks carting 10 Ks.
But does that answer your question? Councillor Old and Councillor.
Thanks, Bert. I just want clarity around item 14 on your submission. I request that SWDC abolish the 100km/h speed limit rule concerning rubbish collection, so more residents can have their rubbish collected. I think that's a speed limit set by the contractor for safety. I don't think it's a rule. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe it's a rule from South Wairarapa District Council, is it?
It's being looked into at the moment as to what the constraints are around.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so I presume that relates to that, doesn't it?
That's about the rubbish collection.
Yeah.
Jenny raised out to Tamuri.
Yeah, well, they just said 100k zone, and we couldn't get any more. But just a very brief word on the rubbish. There was a lot of controversy about rubbish at Tora. I mean, round Mitre 10, they have a shed that's far too expensive, but it's 2 metres by 3 metres, roof on it, slatted walls. That kind of thing could be put at Tora, back to the weather, put the bins in it. It's not going to be an issue.
Yeah, Councillor Flemmer.
You probably get them cheaper somewhere than Mitre 10.
Fills up with holiday makers.
Bert, thanks for coming in, and you and I obviously talked about a lot of this the other night at Tutamuri.
Yeah, well, all the rest of it's in what I have to say here.
Can I just ask you, you've put in here South Wairarapa District Council to build the reserve fund to $1 million. I'm assuming that's not, that's over time.
Yeah, well, in that paper that you had at the meeting at Tutamuri, I read through that, and there was pieces in there to fill in for submissions and things, and that was mentioned in there. It was up from whatever it is now.
Currently, it's 300,000 a year that we put in. You're advocating to put it up to $1 million a year contribution.
That was one of the choices, and yes, because that's like I assume that's like a buffer. You have that. So when climate changes will turn to shit, we're right.
You're aware that under the current rating model, though, that to build that reserve up is 100% on the rural rates.
Yeah, I also realise that, and look, I'm complaining about the rates going up 29%. The pressure's on, and the pressure's on for getting anything done anywhere. We've got sea level rise, we've got the glue falling down Ushers Hill, Wakapooni, down Palliser Road. I understand.
Well, I just want to make sure that you're aware of what you're saying there and the impact that it will have.
Yeah, it's just that it was a choice there, and I just realised that it had to come from somewhere, and I assume that it would be built up over time, not just out of this year.
Okay, so you'd rather we consider the $300,000 a year as we are, and hopefully build it up over time.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Thanks very much, Bert. Great to have you here.
Thanks,
and Susan, come and join us, please.
Go past 3.
We're not going past 3.
Just letting you know.
didn't realise.
Susan, lovely to have you here, and Keith, lovely to have you too. So the next 10 minutes are yours.
Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the work the council does and thank them for it. I also acknowledge the enormous eroding costs caused by the unprecedented rain this year that has used up the roading budget and reserves. However, I put it to you that a 29% increase in rural rates is unsustainable. As a business, we allow a 10% rise in costs year on year, but a 29% rise would cause us to slash costs everywhere else. A budget must be break even at worst. The only option for such a rise in costs is to access more funding from central government in the case of council. However, my understanding is that the second tranche of funding for the original Three Waters has been removed. Therefore, that is not an option. Hence, council needs to reduce its costs to make it a sustainable budget without undermining its ratepayer basis. Would rate paying on capital value make for a fairer proportion for all? In conclusion, I would like to paraphrase Dickens. Happiness is earning $20 and spending $19.50. Misery is earning $19.50 and spending $20. Let us be the former rather than the latter.
Thank you very much. It's a while since I've heard Dickens quoted at a council meeting, but I appreciate that. Now, would your companion like to add anything?
I'd just like to back up that idea that 29% is just too tough for us. Well, for any business long term, and it seems that if we need it, the answer must be in more long-term borrowing somehow, so that we're not forced to do this in a short-term time frame.
Thank you both. Now, councillors may have questions, so can I start by apologising for having you come at the end of the day? I suppose somebody always has to be last, don't they?
I was the shortest.
You do win that prize.
That one guarantee that.
Yeah.
Yes, you absolutely were. In fact, under 3 minutes. So yes, you're the Peter Snell of submitters. So a question from anyone? Yes, thank you. No. Okay. Right. Well, then, look, in that case, can I thank you for joining us today? And we look forward to hearing from you again sometime. Thank you. So, councillors, what I will just do at this stage is to remind you that at 10 o'clock tomorrow, we have a further continuation of this where we deliberate on what we've heard, and hopefully by 3 o'clock tomorrow, we will have some guidance to send to Paul and his team about where we want the annual plan to go. But I thought just before we did, we've got 10 minutes. Is there anything anybody wants to sort of get off their chest, something that's really sort of impressed you that you think you should say now in case you forget about it by tomorrow? But
I've written it all down.
I've written a huge amount of notes, but I think, if we're looking for any theme that came out of today, the overwhelming return message that we kept getting was, roading maintenance and the need for it to be regular, consistent and efficient, and how we continue to have that conversation moving forward, even past the AP conversation, I think is something we need to think about quite seriously.
And I would.
I think the other thing that is that panacea for all the problems. It's actually about how we split the pie, and pie is going to grow by doing a rating review. And I think we're going to have to manage the message about this when it comes to go out, because it won't be a panacea for everybody's problems.
Well, we don't make it everybody's problem. I think we make sure we get the message out there that we are serious about the business in hand of a rating review. I think that's most important.
Most of, obviously roading just comes through, right, from the rules, you guys, it's just a consistent thing throughout the day has been roads more than anything else, especially for the rural ratepayers. That's what they seem okay with everything else. It's like just fix the road outside my place.
I think a very hard part about it too is that that's the message that we get a lot, is that like what do we get for our rates? Just a road. The road's not even in good condition. It sort of brings it back even stronger. It's not all they get for their rates, but it's, it's the most visible thing. Yeah.
Go down there this weekend with a
wheelbarrow
full of gravel and a grader. This wheelbarrow will go a long way. I'm on the wheelbarrow.
And I think another message that comes through quite a lot of the time is that people are looking for local cooperation with council, so that we are using local knowledge, etc. And that was something I picked up, and I did pick up that 29% is a lot. And
29%, and they already pay large $1,000 figures is massive jump, not like a $500 jump. You're talking thousands of dollars. I've got a question before actually. So Dan Rupert said, sorry, I made what you were.
No, I'm not getting ready to.
I'm still live, sorry.
Is it still running live?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine, because I mean, one of the things I've emphasised all the way through any process of rating review is that in the urban area, we have commercial operators, for instance, and we rate them commercially because they're a business. They've got the opportunity. They claim GST. They claim the expense as a business operating expense. Thank you. Well, what's the difference between our farming community out there, for instance, who run a business? They produce meat, wool, milk. They're a commercial business. Honey, yeah, and they operate their businesses in the same fashion. They claim their GST back, or they pay their GST on their product. They claim their operating expenses through taxation measures. So, so they write off their rates to a large extent as an overhead and an operating expense. So I've always had a bit of a quandary about.
I think 30% is a huge increase on the cost of doing business.
Oh, absolutely. But so's our commercial rates in places like Featherston and Greytown are basically double the residential rate. So that's a cost of doing business also. So
the difference for the farmer, I think, to a business in town, might want to correct me, but so a farmer gets dictated that his fertilizer's just gone up by like 200%. Then he gets dictated by the meatworks or the dairy industry that, oh, hold on, we're not going to pay you that much for your meat anymore. Your meat's land being $200, we're only going to give you $100. Same with the honey industry at the moment. That's actually bombed. So a lot of these guys are actually yields are finding it extremely hard because not only are they getting hit with increased costs, they're getting hit with the drop of income because the prices are dropping on. It's like the log market.
So is that any different? Any other?
Well, if you own a cafe in town, then the price of your pastry goes up, well, you put your Tide Pod, don't they? But they don't have that opportunity. They're dictated to by the market.
But as Boz would say, the hospitality industry is all about discretionary spending. So at the moment, discretionary spending is going down, not up. So,
well, theirs is too, but the problem with these poor farmers is discretionary spending. Sometimes not fertilising your paddocks. You don't fertilise your paddocks, you don't go grow your grass. All of a sudden you don't have as many stock, you don't have as much meat to sell. So it's
I can get some rationale behind that. The problem I have, of course, is that most farmers, and particularly dairy farmers, are shareholders in their organisations.
Yeah.
So they, to some extent, have a large say. And if the export market closes or slows down for their product overseas, it does have an impact on their income. However, this, it's like any business, you build a buffer and effectively to take you through the hard times. And that was an experience I learned many years ago, is that you need to have a buffer there because there will be hard times.
I'm with you there. I feel more for the sheep and beef than I do for the dairy farmers. Have had a pretty good run for quite a while.
A lot of farms were converted to dairy simply for that reason.
I know a mate of mine's a dairy farmer that told me what he budgets on, what he can run on, what he's paid, and he said some people just don't run down to that. They think their budget's here. Well, I can do it for this. You know, but he's never paid it quite.
So I think the submission that we read was, and I found really interesting, was, and I don't know if you all read it, about the bees. And the farmer said, I'm not making any money out of honey this year because there's a glut of honey.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure how that equates to us setting rates and providing services, because the industry has been poorly managed, or they've created that. That's, you know, we can't take that into account of the rate setting.
That's correct.
But we have to be sensible, though. We have to be sensible.
We have to acknowledge that there are.
I'd like to make sure everybody gets the chance to do that off the chest. Councillor Gray, have you got any opening thoughts today, or?
Still broadcasting.
Say something polite then.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's that that overwhelming pressure of knowing that what we're asking is an appalling thing to ask of people, but also knowing that if we don't ask that, we can't do our jobs properly and then people will suffer. And so it's, still very much up in the, hard to make decisions around it and listen to how much people are hurting, but then also knowing that we've got a lot of issues that we have to fix, and that a lot of those issues are legacy items that we have inherited. Yeah, it's difficult.
Right. Well, look, thank you, everybody. And I just recall at this stage a little sort of malapropism that Councillor Olds commented on the other day. He said often he gets to the end of the day and he feels a bit deflated. I think what he meant was a bit sort of, it's been a heavy day for us all. We've all been, I think, attentive and listened carefully. And I think many of us do feel the need for a recharging, and so that we come back fresh in the morning. There's an interim CEO laughing at me. So, kia whakaere te tapu, kia watia aiteara, ki turiki whakatahi ai, kia turiki whakatahi ai, haumi ai, hui ai, whaikaiki ai. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rob.
And also additionally,
Amanda.
thank you for
Thanks, Amy.
I'm still here, just getting out. Ka kite.